Yeah, people say money doesn't grow on trees. Well, today, we're looking at a place where it practically did, at least for a while, One Wall Street. It's a New York City landmark that's gone from a bank vault to luxury condos. And it's seen a lot of financial history in between.
It really is a fascinating example of how a building can reflect the ambitions and anxieties of its time. I think you'll find it particularly intriguing given your interest in architecture and urban development.
All right, so let's get this deep dive rolling. The spot where this iconic skyscraper stands today has a surprisingly quirky past, right?
Mm.
Before all that glass and steel, it was home to something called the Chimney Building.
Yeah, and I have to admit, even with all the research I've done on this topic, the chimney building still makes me chuckle a little. Can you just imagine this tiny structure? It was only 29 feet wide by 39 feet deep, and it stood on what was considered the world's most valuable plot of land at the time.
Wait, seriously? That's like the ultimate real estate flex. It's like, look at me, I'm so valuable, I don't even need to take up much space. But of course, even the Chimney Building couldn't hold on to that prime location forever.
Of course not. And what's fascinating is how the site saw a succession of buildings, each one pushing the boundaries of what was possible at the time. Like the Manhattan Life Insurance Building, which was completed in 1894. It actually held the title of the world's tallest building for a few years.
Wow, I had no idea that such an unassuming spot had such a grand history. I guess it makes sense, though. The late 19th and early 20th centuries were a time of incredible growth for New York City, especially in lower Manhattan. And with the rise of the banking industry, Wall Street became the epicenter of it all.
Exactly. And the corner of Broadway and Wall Street was where everyone wanted to be, which is why the buildings that went up there were not just functional, but also incredibly ambitious in their design. They were meant to make a statement about power and progress.
So let's fast forward to 1931, when our star of the show, One Wall Street, finally makes its grand debut. Now, I know this building is considered a masterpiece of Art Deco architecture, and I have to say, those photos you shared of the facade are simply stunning.
Well, the architect, Ralph Thomas Walker, really had a vision for this building. He had designed some incredible Art Deco telephone buildings before, but this was his only completed skyscraper, and he went all out.
No pressure there, right? So what makes One Wall Street's Art Deco style stand out from the crowd? I mean, there are a lot of Art Deco buildings in New York City.
Well, one thing that sets it apart is the choice of materials. The facade is made entirely of limestone, which was a very rare and expensive choice at the time. Most buildings used brick because it was more cost effective, but Walker was determined to create something truly exceptional.
Limestone. Talk about making an entrance. I'm already picturing myself strolling down Broadway, gazing up at that gleaming facade, feeling like $1,000,000.
I think that was part of the intention behind the design to evoke a sense of grandeur and stability, especially given that the building was completed shortly after the 1929 stock market crash.
So it was a bit of a visual reassurance in uncertain times, like saying, hey, we're still here and we're as solid as this limestone facade.
Speaking of the facade, can we talk about those vertical bays with the fluting? They are so striking in the photos you shared.
They're called curtain wall fluting, and they are a signature element of Walker's style. He used them to create a sense of verticality and movement, almost like a curtain being drawn back to reveal the building's inner workings.
That's a great way to describe it. It's like the building is both elegant and powerful with a hint of mystery behind that curtain.
And if you look closely, you'll notice that the curtain wall fluting on One Wall Street is a bit different from Walker's other work. It's more pronounced and dramatic, perhaps, reflecting the building's importance and scale. Interesting, it's like he was pushing the boundaries of his own style with this building, creating something unique and memorable. But there are other details that make One Wall Street so iconic, right?
Absolutely. And one of the most striking features is the use of chamfered corners. That's where the edges of the building are cut away at an angle. And it creates a more streamlined, almost aerodynamic look.
Oh, I see what you mean. It's like the building is slicing through the air, reaching for the sky. I bet those chamfered corners also allow for more light to reach the street level, right?
Exactly. They're both stylish and functional, and they create a sense of lightness and transparency that was very much in keeping with the Art Deco aesthetic.
Form and function, all in one. Now, I also noticed that the building steps back as it goes higher, like a giant wedding cake. Those are called setbacks, right?
Yes, the setbacks are another notable feature of One Wall Street. And they weren't just for aesthetics, they were actually a response to the 1916 zoning resolution. It was enacted to prevent skyscrapers from overshadowing the streets and blocking light and air.
So it's a combination of design innovation and urban planning. I love how these elements come together in a building like this.
And it's those subtle but impactful details that make all the difference, like the original curved window frames. They were custom made to follow the contours of the facade.
Wait, curved window frames. That must have added a hefty sum to the construction costs.
You're right, those custom frames reportedly added a whopping $40,000 to the project back in 1931. But it was a testament to Walker's commitment to detail and his desire to create a building that was truly exceptional.
Well, I guess when you're building on the world's most valuable plot of land, you could afford to splurge a little. But you know what really caught my eye in those photos you sent? The Red Room. It looks absolutely breathtaking.
Ah, yes. The Red Room is arguably the most famous part of One Wall Street, and it's a prime example of how Art Deco could be used to create spaces that are both visually stunning and deeply symbolic.
From the photos, it looks like a cross between a grand ballroom and a luxurious lounge. What was the purpose of this space originally?
Well, it was designed as the main reception area for Irving Trust, the bank that commissioned the building, so it was meant to make a strong first impression on clients.
I can only imagine the conversations that took place in that room. Bankers in pinstripe suits discussing billion-dollar deals over cocktails. But let's talk design. What makes the Red Room so visually captivating?
There are so many elements to admire, but I think the most striking feature is the mosaic ceiling. It covers the entire room, and we're talking over 8,900 square feet of meticulously arranged tiles.
Whoa, that's bigger than my entire apartment.
And what's fascinating is that these tiles were manufactured in both Long Island City and Berlin. So they represent a collaboration between American and European craftsmanship.
It's like a transatlantic handshake captured in a mosaic.
Was there a specific story or theme they were trying to depict with this ceiling design?
While there's no specific narrative, there are some clever design choices. The tiles gradually transition from a rich red on the lower walls to lighter shades as you move upwards, so it draws the eye toward the ceiling and emphasizes its grandeur. That's a really cool detail. What about the gold accents I see in the photos?
Those are abstract patterns woven throughout the mosaic. They add a touch of opulence and they tie the whole design together.
The Red Room sounds absolutely mesmerizing. It's like a work of art in itself, and I bet it must have been quite a statement piece back in the 1930s.
It certainly was, and I think it still holds that power today. It's a reminder that even in the midst of financial uncertainty, beauty and creativity can prevail. That Red Room, as impressive as it is, was just the grand entrance to a building that was designed to function like a city within a city.
Wait, really? A city within a city? I mean, I know One Wall Street is a pretty massive skyscraper, but I never thought of it that way.
Well, think about it. The original building had 50 stories and was built to house thousands of employees for Irving Trust. The sheer scale of the operation required a complex and efficient layout. It was almost like a self-contained urban environment.
So how did they manage to fit everyone in? I'm picturing like a scene from a 1930s movie with endless rows of desks and typewriters clacking away.
The lower floors were designed for efficiency. They had large, open floor plans to accommodate Irving Trust's clerical staff. And as you went higher, the floors became smaller and they were rented out to other businesses. So presumably there were fewer people per square foot up there.
Makes sense. The higher you climb, the more exclusive it gets. Any cool features or hidden gems on those upper floors? Anything that would make those office workers feel like they were on top of the world, literally.
Oh, absolutely. There was a 3-story observation lounge. Can you imagine? A place to take a break from the hustle and bustle and enjoy panoramic views of the city. And for the real VIPs, the executive lounge on the 49th floor boasted a ceiling made of gold leaf seashells.
Gold leaf seashell. Now that's what I call decorating with a touch of flair. I wonder if anyone ever tried to pocket one of those seashells as a souvenir. But seriously, building this big and complex, I'm sure there were some interesting quirks or maybe even some design challenges they had to overcome.
Well, you know what they say about even the best laid plans. Interestingly, the original designs for One Wall Street actually included provisions for double-decker elevators.
Double-decker elevators, like a 2-story elevator. Now, that's something I'd love to see in action, though I have to admit, the thought of getting stuck between floors in one of those is a bit unnerving.
I can only imagine the logistical challenges they would have faced with those double-decker elevators. Coordinating the stops, ensuring smooth transitions between floors, it's mind-boggling. Ultimately, they were never installed, but it's a fascinating glimpse into the ambitions and maybe the overexuberance of that era.
I guess sometimes even the most innovative ideas have to be shelved for practical reasons. But There's one feature of One Wall Street that I'm particularly intrigued by, and it's not on any of the upper floors. It's buried deep underground. I'm talking, of course, about that legendary bank vault.
Ah, yes, the vault. It's a true testament to the era's obsession with security and perhaps a reflection of the anxieties that lingered after the 1929 crash. This was no ordinary vault. We're talking about a 5,000-ton behemoth buried 69 to 72 feet underground. To put that into perspective, it was the third largest bank vault in the world when it was built.
5,000 tons. That's heavier than a herd of elephants. They weren't messing around when it came to protecting their assets. But what kind of security measures did they have in place? I'm picturing laser beams, motion sensors, maybe even a moat filled with piranhas.
Well, maybe not piranhas, but they did have some pretty impressive defenses. 6-foot thick walls made of iron, steel, and concrete, 6 30-inch thick vault doors, each rigged with chemical systems that would release paralyzing fumes if tampered with. They even had a time lock mechanism to prevent unauthorized access.
Paralyzing fumes. Okay, now that's hardcore security. I'm picturing a would-be bank robber stumbling out of the vault, dazed and confused, muttering, "I just wanted to borrow a cup of sugar." But seriously, those security measures were clearly designed to deter even the most determined thief. Were there any documented attempts to breach the vault?
That's a good question. I haven't come across any specific accounts of attempted heists, but given the vault's reputation and the level of security, it's safe to say that it would have been an incredibly daunting target. It's probably one of those cases where the best deterrent is the sheer impossibility of the task.
I bet those vault designers were pretty proud of themselves. They were basically saying, go ahead, make our day. But all joking aside, it's amazing to think about the level of trust and responsibility that went into building and maintaining a vault of that magnitude.
Absolutely. It was a symbol of the bank's strength and stability, a reassurance to its customers that their assets were safe and sound. And it's also a reminder of how technology and design have evolved over time. Nowadays, we rely on digital security measures, but back then it was all about physical barriers and brute force protection.
It's like a time capsule of security measures. But speaking of time capsules, I'm curious about what happened to One Wall Street after its heyday as a bank headquarters. I mean, those grand banking halls and that massive vault must have seemed like relics of a bygone era at some point.
It certainly went through a major transformation. Irving Trust kept growing and eventually merged with the Bank of New York, which later became BNY Mellon. So there were several changes in ownership over the years.
So the building went through some corporate shuffling. Did they make any significant changes to the structure itself?
They did some renovations and expansions over the years. For example, a 28-story annex was added in 1965 to accommodate the bank's growth. But the most drastic change came in 2014 when Harry Macklowe, a well-known real estate developer, purchased the building with a bold vision in mind.
Yeah, I've heard that name before. Didn't he develop 432 Park Avenue, that super tall and skinny luxury tower?
That's him. And he saw the potential to transform One Wall Street into something completely different, a luxury residential complex in the heart of the financial district.
Luxury condos in a former bank.
Yeah.
That's a concept. It's like turning Fort Knox into a high-end apartment building. But how did they pull that off? I mean, those floor plans were originally designed for offices and bank tellers. Not exactly the open concept living spaces we see in most condos these days.
It was a massive undertaking. It involved a complete gut renovation that lasted from 2018 to 2023. They had to remove tons of elevators and escalators, 34 and 16 respectively, to create the space for the new residential units.
Wow, that's a lot of elevator shafts. I bet they encountered some logistical nightmares along the way, especially considering that they were working around an existing subway station below.
It was definitely a complex project, but they managed to pull it off, and the results are quite impressive. They even took great care to preserve some of the building's original features, like the iconic Red Room, which is now a retail space.
I'm glad they didn't demolish that Red Room. It would have been a crime against architecture to destroy such a masterpiece. But speaking of the renovation, how successful has it been? I mean, are people actually clamoring to live in a former bank?
Well, that's where things get interesting. The conversion was completed in 2023, and while they have some truly luxurious amenities, a swimming pool, an observation deck, even a golf simulator, they've actually been struggling to sell all of the units.
Really? I'm surprised. I mean, it's a prime location, close to everything, and those amenities sound incredible. What's the holdup?
There are a few factors at play, I think. First, the financial district, while evolving, is still primarily a commercial hub. So attracting residents to a neighborhood that traditionally empties out after work hours can be a challenge.
That makes sense. Plus, I imagine that the pandemic changed people's priorities when it came to living spaces. Suddenly, having a backyard or easy access to outdoor space became more important than ever before.
Exactly. And while the financial district is becoming more residential, it still has some catching up to do in terms of meeting those evolving needs.
So One Wall Street, this architectural icon with its rich and layered history, goes from being the world's most valuable plot of land to a sought-after bank headquarters, and now finds itself navigating a new chapter as a luxury residential complex. It's almost like the building itself is mirroring the changing landscape of New York City.
It's a fascinating example of how buildings can adapt and evolve over time, reflecting the shifting priorities and aspirations of the city around them. Speaking of layers, when we connect this back to your initial questions, I think it's intriguing to consider what the future holds for One Wall Street. Will it successfully shed its skin as a former bank headquarters and become a coveted address for downtown living? Or will it struggle to attract residents who might still associate it with the hustle and bustle of the financial district?
Yeah, it's like this grand old dame of a building is trying to reinvent herself for a new generation, but will they embrace her unique charm? I mean, it makes you wonder what it would be like to live in a place with such a rich and layered history. Do those residents ever think about the thousands of bankers who walked those halls before them? Or the secrets that might be hidden deep within that legendary vault?
I would imagine it would be quite an experience living in a space that's been witness to so much history, both grand and mundane. It's like inhabiting a living museum, but with all the modern conveniences. And of course, those breathtaking views of the city.
Okay, last question for you. If you could go back in time and experience One Wall Street in its prime, what would you be most curious to see? Would it be the hustle and bustle of the trading floor, the click-clack of typewriters in those vast clerical offices, or maybe even a glimpse of those elusive double-decker elevators in action?
Oh, that's a tough one. There are so many moments in this building's history that I'd love to witness firsthand. But I think what would fascinate me most is to see the Red Room on opening day back in 1931. To imagine the excitement and anticipation in the air, to witness how people reacted to that incredible space, to feel the energy of that era, it would be truly captivating.
Yeah, I can picture it now. The gleaming marble floors, the sunlight streaming through those curved windows, the chatter of conversations echoing off the mosaic ceiling must have been quite a spectacle. And to think that this building, which once symbolized the might of the financial world, is now welcoming a new chapter as a residential space?
Yeah, it speaks to the ever-changing nature of cities, how they adapt and evolve over time, repurposing spaces and reinterpreting their meaning. And for you, listening, we'd love to know, what aspect of One Wall Street's story resonates most with you? Is it the architectural details, the historical significance, or maybe those human stories woven into its fabric? What has captured your imagination?
We always love hearing your thoughts. And here's something to ponder as you go about your day. Imagine you've been given the keys to One Wall Street. What would you do with it? Would you preserve it as a museum, showcasing its architectural and historical significance? Would you transform it into a cutting-edge tech hub, breathing new life into its grand spaces? Or would you come up with something entirely different, a use that reflects the evolving needs and desires of the city?
Let your imagination run wild with this one. And remember, as with any great architectural masterpiece, the story of One Wall Street continues to unfold. Until next time, keep exploring and keep those deep dives going.